I was stocking shelves at the hardware store when my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification from my neighbor Betty. Her message was simple. "Mark, I think you should see this." The attached photo made my hands shake so violently I dropped the box of screws I was holding. Please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what city you're watching from. There was Caleb, my 30-year-old son, in a black tuxedo, kissing a woman in white. Sarah, 25 years old and beautiful in that calculated way. Some women perfect early. Behind them stood Linda, my ex-wife, beaming with pride. The church looked familiar. St. Michael's, where Caleb had been baptized 28 years ago, where Linda and I had gotten married 32 years ago. The caption read, "Congratulations to the happy couple. Beautiful ceremony at St. Michael's this afternoon." This afternoon. Today. My son had gotten married today, and I found out through a Facebook post from someone who wasn't even there. I walked to the employee bathroom and locked the door. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as I read through the comments. Dozens of congratulations from people I recognized. Linda's sister Karen, her brother Doug, even some of my old friends from the construction crew. All of them had known. All of them had been there. "Such a perfect day for a wedding," wrote my former neighbor Jan. "Sarah looked absolutely radiant," added Linda's college friend Michelle. "So happy for this wonderful family," commented my own cousin Robert. My own cousin had been there, had watched my son promise his life to someone else, and never thought to mention that the groom's father might want to know. I called Caleb's number. It went straight to voicemail. His voice, happy and carefree. "Hey, this is Caleb. I'm probably out living my best life. Leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can." For living his best life on his wedding day, without his father. I tried again an hour later. Voicemail. Again at 6 o'clock. Voicemail. By 8 in the evening, I understood that this wasn't an oversight or poor planning. This was intentional. The chest pain started during my drive home, sharp stabbing sensations that made me pull over twice on the 15-minute route to my apartment. I told myself it was stress, heartburn, anything but what it felt like, my heart literally breaking under the weight of this betrayal. At home, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and opened my laptop. The photos were everywhere now. Sarah's Instagram account, which I'd never looked at before, was full of wedding pictures, professional shots, candid moments, group photos with everyone who mattered in their lives. Everyone except me. I scrolled through the images with morbid fascination. There was Linda, mother of the groom, in a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. There was Sarah's mother, Patricia, looking pleased with herself in something sparkly. There were Sarah's brothers, her college friends, even her grandmother in a wheelchair, smiling broadly. In one photo I could see the spot where I should have been standing. Right next to Linda, in the family section, there was an empty space. Not even a flower arrangement to mark where the groom's father might have sat. Just empty pew, as if I had never existed in Caleb's life at all. The pain in my chest intensified. I reached for my phone to call 911, then stopped. What would I tell them? That my heart was broken because my son didn't invite me to his wedding? That I felt like I was dying because the boy I'd raised for 18 years had erased me from the most important day of his life? I managed to drive myself to the emergency room. The nurse, a kind woman named Janet, took my vitals and asked about my symptoms. When I mentioned the chest pain and shortness of breath, they rushed me back immediately. "Any family history of heart disease?" asked Dr. Rodriguez, a young man who looked barely older than Caleb. "My father died of a heart attack at 62, I told him. "But this isn't that kind of pain." "What kind of pain is it? How do you explain to a doctor that your heart hurts because your son got married without telling you? That every beat feels like a reminder of your own irrelevance?" "Emotional," I finally said. "My son got married today. I found out on Facebook." Dr. Rodriguez's expression softened. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." The EKG showed irregular rhythm. My blood pressure was elevated. They kept me overnight for observation, and Linda never called. Caleb never called, not even when the hospital contacted my emergency contact, which was still Linda from back when we thought family meant something. I lay in that hospital bed, listening to machines beep and thinking about the last conversation I'd had with Caleb. 3 weeks ago, he'd called to ask if I could lend him $2,000 for unexpected expenses. I'd transferred the money immediately, no questions asked. Now I wondered if those unexpected expenses had been wedding costs. Had my own money paid for the reception where I wasn't welcome? The nurse checked on me every few hours. During one of her visits, I asked her about visiting hours. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked kindly. "My son," I said. "He just got married. He might want to check on his old man." She squeezed my hand. "I'm sure he will." But morning came and went. The doctor discharged me with instructions to follow up with my primary care physician and prescriptions for blood pressure medication and stress management. I took a taxi home because I'd left my truck in the hospital parking lot and felt too weak to drive. My apartment felt smaller than usual, quieter. On the kitchen table sat the card I'd bought for Caleb 3 months ago, a congratulations on your engagement card that I'd never had the chance to give him. Inside, I'd written, "Son, watching you find love makes my heart full. I can't wait to see what beautiful life you and Sarah build together. Love always, Dad." The card looked pathetic now, sitting there with its cheerful message and unused envelope. I opened my laptop again and found myself back on Sarah's Instagram. There was a new post from this morning. "Waking up as Mrs. Thompson, best day of my life." The photo showed her and Caleb in bed, probably at some fancy hotel, both of them grinning at the camera. In the comments, Linda had written, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart, so proud of you both." Welcome to the family, as if Sarah was joining something I'd never been part of. As if the family consisted of Linda, Caleb, and now Sarah, with me as some distant, irrelevant figure who'd contributed genetic material 30 years ago and nothing since. My phone rang. For a moment my heart jumped, thinking it might be Caleb, but the caller ID showed my brother Mike. "Mark, Betty told Carol who told me. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "No, you're not. This is cruel, Mark. Even for Linda." Mike was right. Linda and I had divorced 8 years ago, after she decided I lacked ambition and drive. She'd wanted me to expand my contracting business, take on bigger projects, make more money. I'd been content with steady work and honest pay. The divorce had been bitter, but we'd managed to co-parent Caleb without too much drama. At least I thought we had. "Mike, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Anything. Did you know? About the wedding?" A long pause. "Mark, did you know? Carol saw something on Facebook last week. Sarah had posted about final dress fittings. We thought you must know and just hadn't mentioned it." Even my own brother had assumed I knew, had assumed that surely a father would be invited to his son's wedding. The assumption made it worse somehow, that everyone had thought I was there, celebrating with my family, while I was actually stocking shelves and living in ignorance. After hanging up with Mike, I sat in my recliner and tried to piece together how this had happened. When had I become so irrelevant in Caleb's life that he could marry someone without including me? When had Sarah's influence become so strong that she could erase me completely? The chest pain returned, duller now but persistent. I took one of the pills the doctor had prescribed and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would have to figure out how to move forward from this. How to rebuild a relationship with a son who had publicly declared that I didn't matter. But tonight I would just sit in the quiet of my empty apartment and let myself feel the full weight of being forgotten by the person I loved most in the world. The medication made me drowsy, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty pew where I should have been sitting, heard the organ music I should have heard, felt the pride I should have felt watching my son promise his life to someone else. Instead, I felt nothing but the hollow ache of a man who had been erased from his own son's life, one careful manipulation at a time. The letter arrived on Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after I'd discovered my son's wedding through Facebook. I was eating breakfast, instant oatmeal and black coffee, the same meal I'd had every morning since Linda left, when I heard the mail slot click. The envelope was thick, expensive paper with the letterhead of Morrison, Barrett and Associates, a law firm from Seattle I'd never heard of. My first thought was that someone was suing me. These days it seemed like the only news I received was bad news. "Dear Mr. Thompson," the letter began, "we regret to inform you of the passing of your uncle, Frederick Thompson, on March 15th. As per his last will and testament, you have been named as his sole beneficiary." I had to read the sentence 3 times before it sank in. Uncle Frederick, my father's brother, 20 years older than Dad, who'd moved to Seattle when I was 12. I hadn't seen him since my father's funeral 15 years ago, and before that, maybe twice in my adult life. Frederick had been the family oddity, A bachelor who'd made money in real estate during Seattle's tech boom, lived in a modest apartment despite his wealth, and never married or had children. My father had always spoken of him with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. "Frederick sees opportunities where other people see problems," Dad used to say. "Bought up half of downtown Seattle when nobody wanted it." I kept reading. The estate consists of liquid assets valued at approximately $2.7 million, real estate holdings valued at $1.1 million, and investment portfolios valued at approximately $3.8 million. $7.6 million. I set the letter down and walked to the bathroom mirror. The man staring back at me looked like someone who'd just been told he'd won the lottery. Pale, shocked, slightly suspicious that this couldn't be real. $7.6 million. I called the law firm. Margaret Barrett, the attorney handling the estate, confirmed everything in the letter. Frederick had died peacefully in his sleep. He'd been monitoring my life from a distance, knew about my divorce, knew about Caleb, even knew about my small contracting business. "Your uncle was very specific about his wishes," Margaret explained. "He wanted the inheritance to go to someone who understood the value of honest work. He felt you embodied the Thompson family values better than anyone else in the family. But why now? Why didn't he ever reach out?" Mr. Thompson was a private man, but he kept track of family members through mutual acquaintances and public records. "He knew about your son's recent marriage, actually. He mentioned it in our last conversation." My stomach dropped. "He knew about the wedding." "Yes, he seemed pleased that your son had found happiness. He spoke about wanting to meet his new daughter-in-law." Uncle Frederick had known about Caleb's wedding. A man I'd barely spoken to in 30 years had known more about my son's life than I did. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and tried to process this information. $7.6 million would change everything. I could pay off my mortgage, expand my business, travel, maybe even retire early. But more importantly, it would give me security, independence, respect. The kind of respect that might make my son want me in his life again. That afternoon, I drove to Caleb's apartment complex. I'd been there only once before, when he'd first moved in 2 years ago. It was one of those modern places with a fancy name, the Metropolitan, and rent that cost more than my mortgage payment. I knocked on his door, holding the legal documents in my hand. Maybe this news could be the bridge we needed to rebuild our relationship. Caleb answered, wearing gym clothes, looking surprised and not particularly pleased to see me. "Dad, what are you doing here? I needed to talk to you about something important." "Can I come in?" He hesitated, glancing back into the apartment. "Sarah's not feeling well. Maybe we could talk some other time." "This won't take long. It's about family business." He stepped outside and closed the door behind him. We stood in the hallway, and I felt like a door-to-door salesman trying to pitch my own son. "Caleb, I need to tell you about your great-uncle Frederick. He passed away last week and left me his entire estate." My son's expression didn't change. "Okay, I'm sorry for your loss. You don't understand. It's significant money, life-changing money, and I wanted you to know because you're my family, and family should share good fortune." "How much money?" $7.6 million. Now his expression changed. His eyes widened, then narrowed slightly as if he was trying to calculate something. That's a lot of money, Dad." "It is, and I want you to know that this changes things for our family. I can help you and Sarah get started in life, maybe buy you a house, help with student loans, whatever you need." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When did you find out about this inheritance?" "This morning. The letter came today." "Why?" "Just wondering." He looked back at his apartment door. "Look, I should get back to Sarah. She's really not feeling well. Caleb, we need to talk about the wedding, about why I wasn't invited." "Dad, please." "Not now." "When then? When can we talk about the fact that my own son got married without telling me?" His face flushed. "You want to know why you weren't invited? Because Sarah was afraid you'd make a scene. Because every time we're together, you make everything about how disappointed you are in my choices. That's not true, isn't it? You hate my apartment. You think Sarah's too young for me. You've made it clear that nothing I do meets your standards." "Son, that's not how I feel at all." "Look, Dad, I'm glad about your inheritance, really, but I need to get back inside." He disappeared into his apartment, leaving me standing in the hallway with my legal documents and my hurt feelings. That evening, I called my lawyer, Tom Mitchell, an old friend from high school who'd handled my divorce. "Tom, I need to set up proper estate planning. I've come into some money, and I want to make sure my son is taken care of." "How much money are we talking about?" "About 7.5 million. Tom whistled low. "Mark, that's serious money. We need to talk about trusts, tax implications, asset protection. Can you come in tomorrow?" "Tom, I have a question. If my son gets married, does his wife automatically have claim to anything I leave him?" "Depends on how we structure it." "Why?" I told him about the wedding, about finding out on Facebook, about the strange conversation with Caleb earlier that day. "Mark, I hate to say this, but you need to be careful. Large inheritances can bring out the worst in people, even family." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Caleb's expression when I told him about the money, the way his eyes had narrowed, like he was calculating something, the way he'd asked when I'd found out about the inheritance. Why would the timing matter, unless he'd already known about it somehow? I opened my laptop and started searching for information about Frederick Thompson. Public records, obituaries, anything that might explain how word of his death and his will might have gotten out. I found Frederick's obituary in the Seattle Times, published 5 days ago. It mentioned his real estate success and his substantial estate. It specifically mentioned that his nephew, Mark Thompson of Portland, was his sole heir. 5 days ago, 3 days before I'd received the official letter from the law firm. If someone had been paying attention to Seattle obituaries, they would have known about my inheritance before I did. I searched for Sarah's social media accounts more thoroughly this time. Her Facebook, her Instagram, her LinkedIn profile. Sarah Mitchell, 25 years old, graduated from Portland State with a degree in business administration, previously employed at Northwest Estate Planning Services. Estate Planning Services. I clicked on her work history. She'd worked there for 2 years until 6 months ago. According to her LinkedIn, she specialized in inheritance law and estate administration. My hands started shaking again. Sarah worked in estate planning. She would know how to search for probate records, how to track inheritance cases, how to find information about wealthy relatives dying in nearby cities. She would have known about Uncle Frederick's death and his will before anyone else. I grabbed my phone and called Tom Mitchell at home. "Tom, I need you to check something for me. Can you find out if anyone else has been making inquiries about Frederick Thompson's estate? Specifically, if anyone's been asking about the beneficiaries." "Mark, it's 10:30 at night." "Tom, I think my son's wife knew about this inheritance before I did. I think she married my son to get access to this money." There was a long pause. "I'll make some calls in the morning, Mark. If what you're thinking is true, we need to move very carefully. We need to protect your assets and document everything." "What do you mean, protect my assets?" "I mean, we need to make sure that money stays yours until we figure out what's really going on here." After hanging up, I sat in my dark living room and tried to piece together a timeline. Sarah had worked in estate planning until 6 months ago. 6 months ago was when she and Caleb had gotten serious about their relationship. 6 months ago was when she'd started pushing for a quick engagement, according to the few conversations I'd had with Caleb about her. The wedding had been planned quickly, too quickly for a normal couple, but not too quickly for someone who knew that a large inheritance was coming and wanted to ensure legal rights to it through marriage. I thought about the empty pew at the wedding, the space where I should have been sitting. Maybe my exclusion hadn't been about embarrassment or family drama. Maybe it had been about keeping me from asking the wrong questions at the wrong time. Maybe Sarah had never planned for me to be part of Caleb's life at all. Maybe I was just an obstacle to be removed, a complication in her plan to access Thompson family money. The chest pain returned, but this time it felt different. Not like heartbreak, but like anger. Cold, calculating anger at the possibility that my son had been manipulated into cutting me out of his life by someone who saw our family as nothing more than a financial opportunity. I reached for my blood pressure medication, then stopped. Instead, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I could remember about Sarah's behavior, her timeline with Caleb, and the circumstances of their rushed marriage. If Tom's investigation confirmed my suspicions, I would need evidence, and if Sarah Thompson thought she could manipulate my son and steal my family's legacy, she was about to discover that a Thompson man doesn't go down without a fight. Tom Mitchell called me at 7:30 Friday morning, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Mark, you need to get to my office, now, and bring every document you have related to your inheritance." I'd been awake since 4, drinking coffee and staring at my laptop screen, where I'd spent the night researching Sarah Mitchell Thompson. By dawn, I'd found enough information to make my stomach turn. Tom's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, the kind of place that screamed old Portland money and established legal practice. His secretary, Mrs. Chen, had worked there for 20 years and knew everyone's business before they did. "He's waiting for you," she said, her usually warm smile replaced by concern. Tom looked like he hadn't slept either. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his desk was covered with papers, printouts, and legal documents. "Sit down, Mark. We have a problem." "How bad?" "Someone filed a request for information about Frederick Thompson's estate with the Seattle Probate Court 6 weeks ago. The request was filed by Northwest Estate Planning Services. Sarah's old company gets worse." The person who filed the request was Sarah Mitchell. She used her professional credentials to access information that wouldn't normally be available to the public. I felt the familiar chest tightness returning. She knew about the inheritance before she married Caleb. "It looks that way, but Mark, there's more. I made some calls to contacts in Seattle. Frederick's attorney, Margaret Barrett, remembers getting several phone calls in the weeks before Frederick died. Someone claiming to be doing a family genealogy project, asking about Frederick's relatives and his estate plans. Sarah again? The caller gave the name Jennifer Smith, but the phone number traces back to a cell phone registered to Sarah Mitchell. I leaned back in my chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. She was monitoring my uncle's condition, waiting for him to die. It gets worse, Mark. I pulled the marriage license. Caleb and Sarah applied for it the day after Frederick's obituary was published. They'd been planning a wedding for months, but they didn't make it legally official until they knew the inheritance was confirmed. The room felt like it was spinning. My son hadn't just excluded me from his wedding, he'd been manipulated into a marriage that was essentially a business transaction. "Tom, I need you to do something for me. I need you to revise my will immediately." "What kind of revisions?" "I want to set up a trust for Caleb that can't be accessed by his spouse without specific conditions being met. I want to make sure that if Sarah is after my money, she'll have to work for it." Tom nodded grimly. "I can do that. But Mark, if we're right about Sarah's intentions, she's not going to stop here. She's going to push for access to your inheritance, probably through Caleb." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. She married your son to gain legal rights to potential inheritance, but right now she has no direct claim to your money. She needs to either get back into your good graces so you'll include her in your will, or she needs to create a situation where Caleb inherits everything quickly." The implication hit me like a cold slap. "You think she might try to hurt me?" "I think she might try to have you declared mentally incompetent. It's a common scam when large inheritances are involved. Create a narrative that you're unstable, unable to manage your affairs, and have a family member petition for guardianship." "That's insane." "Mark, this woman has already demonstrated that she's willing to manipulate your family relationships to access money. She's probably been building a case against your mental stability for months." I thought about Caleb's words in the hallway. Sarah was afraid you'd make a scene. How many other conversations had they had about my supposed instability? "What do I do?" "First, we protect your assets. We set up trusts and legal structures that can't be easily challenged. Second, we document everything. Every interaction with Sarah or Caleb from now on gets recorded or witnessed. Third, we set a trap." "What kind of trap?" Tom smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "We give Sarah exactly what she wants, an opportunity to reveal her true intentions." Over the next hour, Tom outlined a plan that was both elegant and slightly terrifying. We would create a fake document suggesting that I was planning to give Caleb immediate access to a portion of the inheritance. The document would be deliberately flawed, containing information that only someone with access to my real financial records would know was incorrect. "We'll leak this information to Sarah through a channel she trusts," Tom explained. "If she takes the bait, she'll reveal how much she really knows about your finances and her real motivations for marrying Caleb. How do we leak it to her?" "Through Linda. Your ex-wife has always been more concerned with money than she'd like to admit. If we let her think you're planning to give Caleb $1 million immediately, she'll make sure Sarah knows about it." The plan felt risky, but it also felt like the first time since discovering the wedding that I was taking control of my own life. I drove home and called Linda for the first time in 6 months. "Mark, is everything okay?" She sounded surprised but not unfriendly. "I wanted to talk to you about Caleb and this inheritance situation." "What inheritance situation?" I explained about Uncle Frederick, carefully omitting the details about Sarah's possible manipulation. To Linda, I presented it as a happy family development that I wanted to share with my son. $7.5 million? Linda's voice went up an octave. Mark, that's incredible. Caleb must be so excited. Actually, I haven't told him the full amount yet, but Linda, I'm thinking about giving him access to some of it immediately. Maybe $1 million to help him and Sarah get started. That's very generous of you. The thing is, I need to make sure this is handled properly. Tax implications, legal structures, that sort of thing. I don't want Caleb to think I'm trying to control his life, but I also want to make sure the money is protected. Protected from what? Well, you know how it is with young marriages. Statistics show that 50% end in divorce. I want to make sure that if anything happens to Caleb's marriage, the money stays in the Thompson family. There was a long pause. Mark, are you saying you don't trust Sarah? I'm saying I don't know Sarah well enough to trust her with $1 million, do you? Another pause. She seems like a lovely girl. I'm sure she is, but lovely doesn't always mean trustworthy when it comes to money. Linda, can I ask you something? Has Sarah ever asked you about my financial situation? What do you mean? Has she ever asked about my business, my assets, whether I have savings or investments? Mark, why would she ask me about that? Just wondering. It's the kind of thing people sometimes do when they're planning for the future, trying to understand what kind of family they're marrying into. I don't think Sarah is like that. You're probably right. But I'd feel better if I knew more about her intentions. Has she mentioned anything about expecting help from family? Financial support? Maybe help with a house down payment? Well, Linda's voice became more thoughtful. She did mention that she hoped Caleb's family would be supportive of their goals. Buying a house, starting a family, that sort of thing. What kind of goals specifically? They're looking at houses in the $600,000 range. Sarah said she hoped Caleb's father would want to help with the down payment, since family support is so important for young couples. $600,000. Sarah was already spending my inheritance in her mind. Did she say anything else about my potential support? She asked if you were the type of father who would want to be involved in your son's success. She seemed concerned that the estrangement between you and Caleb might affect their ability to get family help. The estrangement. As if my exclusion from the wedding had been a mutual decision rather than a deliberate act of manipulation. Linda, I want you to know that I'm planning to be very generous with Caleb. This inheritance is a chance for our family to move forward, to put the divorce and the hard feelings behind us. That's wonderful, Mark. I know Caleb will be so grateful. I hope so, and I hope Sarah will understand that family loyalty works both ways. I'm willing to support them financially, but I expect to be treated like family in return. Of course, I'm sure they both understand that. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen and waited. If Tom was right about Sarah's motivations, this conversation would reach her within hours, and if she was really after my money, she would find a way to contact me directly. I didn't have to wait long. At 4:15 that afternoon, my phone rang. Caleb's number. Dad, I heard about Uncle Frederick's estate. Linda told Sarah, and Sarah told me. I had no idea you were planning to help us financially. Your mother shouldn't have said anything. I wanted to discuss this with you privately. Dad, this is incredible. Sarah and I have been looking at houses, and we could really use help with a down payment. I'm glad you're excited, son, but there are some things we need to discuss first. Some conditions that need to be met. What kind of conditions? Family conditions, Caleb. If I'm going to invest in your future, I need to be part of your life. That means being included in important decisions, being invited to family events, being treated with the respect that a father deserves. Of course, Dad, I understand completely. Do you? Because the last important event in your life I found out about on Facebook. A pause. Dad, about the wedding. We'll talk about the wedding later. Right now I want to meet with you and Sarah together. I want to discuss this inheritance properly as a family. When? Tomorrow evening. My place. Can you both be here at 7? Absolutely. Dad, thank you. This means everything to us. After hanging up, I called Tom. The hook is set, I told him. They'll be here tomorrow night. Remember, Mark, document everything. If Sarah reveals what she really knows about your finances, we'll have her. And if she doesn't, then maybe we're wrong about her. Maybe she really does love your son and we're seeing conspiracy where there's just coincidence. But I didn't think we were wrong. I thought Sarah Thompson had made a very calculated decision to marry into my family for money, and tomorrow night I was going to give her enough rope to hang herself with. The chest pain was gone now, replaced by something cold and focused. For the first time since finding out about the wedding, I felt like I was fighting back, rather than just absorbing punishment. Tomorrow, I would discover whether my son had married for love, or if he'd been manipulated into becoming a pawn in someone else's financial game. Either way, the truth would finally come out. Saturday evening came with spring rain pattering against my apartment windows. I'd spent the day preparing for Caleb and Sarah's visit, both emotionally and practically. Tom had helped me set up a small recording device hidden in my bookshelf that would capture everything said in my living room. Legal in Oregon, as long as one party to the conversation consented. At 6:45, I heard footsteps on the stairs outside my apartment. Through the peephole, I watched my son adjust his tie nervously while Sarah checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was wearing a conservative dress and carried a leather portfolio, the look of someone preparing for a business meeting rather than a family visit. "Dad, this is Sarah," Caleb said when I opened the door, as if I hadn't met her a dozen times during their 2-year relationship. "Hello, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, extending her hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so sorry we haven't had more opportunities to get to know each other." The irony wasn't lost on me. She was apologizing for not knowing me, while simultaneously being the reason I'd been excluded from knowing her. "Please, come in. Can I get you something to drink?" They settled on my couch, Sarah's portfolio resting on her lap like armor. Caleb looked nervous, fidgeting with his wedding ring, a detail that still stung to notice. "Dad." "Sarah wanted to apologize for the wedding situation," Caleb began. Sarah placed her hand on his arm, a gesture that looked practiced. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that excluding you wasn't personal. We just wanted something small and intimate." "Small and intimate," I repeated. "How many people attended?" "About 80, Caleb answered. 80 people, including your great-aunt Margaret from Minnesota, who I haven't seen in 15 years. Sarah's smile flickered. "Family dynamics can be complicated." "Yes, they can be, especially when people aren't honest about their motivations." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Sarah opened her portfolio and pulled out a manila folder. "Mr. Thompson, Caleb told me about your generous offer to help us with our future. I wanted to show you what we're planning so you can see that your investment would be well used." She spread out house listings, loan pre-approval letters, and what looked like a detailed budget spreadsheet. Everything was organized with the precision of someone who'd done this type of presentation before. "We've identified several properties in the $400,000 to $600,000 range," she continued. "With your help, we could put down 20% and avoid PMI, which would save us thousands over the life of the loan. You've done your homework. I believe in being prepared. Financial planning is something I take very seriously." I picked up one of the house listings. "This one's nice. $750,000 though. That's more than you mentioned." "We could make it work with the right family support," Sarah said smoothly. "How much family support are you thinking?" Sarah and Caleb exchanged a look. She nodded slightly, as if giving him permission to speak. "Dad, we were hoping for maybe $200,000 for the down payment." $200,000. I set down the listing. "That's quite a bit more than the $1 million I was considering giving you total." Sarah's eyes sharpened slightly. "You were planning to give Caleb $1 million? "I was considering it, but now I'm thinking that might not be the best approach." "What do you mean?" Caleb asked. "I mean, I've been doing some research of my own, learning about estate planning, inheritance law, tax implications. It's fascinating how complex these things can be." I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a folder. Not the fake document Tom and I had prepared, but a real inheritance document from Uncle Frederick's estate. "For instance, did you know that inheritance money can be traced through multiple generations? If I give you money now, and you use it to buy a house, that house becomes marital property that could be divided in a divorce." Sarah's composure slipped slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I hope you don't think Caleb and I are planning to divorce." "Of course not. But statistics show that couples who marry quickly, especially when large amounts of money are involved, have higher divorce rates." "We didn't marry quickly," Caleb protested. 9 months from first date to wedding day, that's pretty quick, son." "We knew what we wanted," Sarah said firmly. "Did you? Or did you know what you needed?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah's hand tightened on her portfolio. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Thompson." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking direct questions. Sarah, when did you first learn about Uncle Frederick? What do you mean? When did you first become aware that Caleb had a great uncle in Seattle who might leave money to the family? I don't understand the relevance of that question. The relevance is that I'm trying to understand the timeline of your relationship with my son. When you fell in love, when you decided to get married, when you started planning for your financial future together. Caleb looked confused. Dad, what does Uncle Frederick have to do with Sarah and me? I opened the folder and pulled out a document, the probate court request that Tom had discovered. This is a public record from the King County Probate Court in Seattle. It shows that someone named Sarah Mitchell requested information about Frederick Thompson's estate 6 weeks before he died. The color drained from Sarah's face. Sarah Mitchell, I continued. That was your maiden name, wasn't it? Dad, what's going on? Caleb looked between us, clearly lost. Your wife used her professional credentials to investigate my uncle's estate before he died, son. She knew about the inheritance before I did. She knew about it before you married her. That's ridiculous, Sarah said, but her voice had lost its confidence. Is it? You worked for Northwest Estate Planning Services until 6 months ago. Part of your job was researching inheritance cases. You had access to databases and court records that most people don't. I don't have to listen to these accusations. Actually, you do. Because if you want any part of my inheritance, you're going to explain why you were monitoring my uncle's health and estate plans. Caleb stood up abruptly. Dad, stop, you're talking crazy. Am I? Caleb, when did Sarah first suggest you should get married quickly? We didn't get married quickly. When did she first say she wanted a small wedding? She always wanted something intimate. When did she first mention that I might not be stable enough to attend your wedding? Caleb's mouth opened, but no words came out. She never said that, he finally managed. Then why wasn't I invited? Because Sarah told you I would cause problems, that I would embarrass you, that I was jealous of your success and would try to ruin your special day. That's not exactly what she said. Sarah stood up, clutching her portfolio. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. You're right, you can leave anytime. But if you do, you leave empty-handed. No down payment money, no family support, no access to Thompson family assets. She stopped at the door. You can't cut Caleb out of his inheritance because you don't like his wife. I'm not cutting Caleb out of anything, but I am protecting my assets from people who see my family as a business opportunity. You're paranoid. Am I? Sarah, how much money do you think I inherited from Uncle Frederick? I don't know. Yes, you do. You researched his estate. You know exactly how much money we're talking about. She stood frozen, one hand on the door handle. $7.6 million, I said. That's what the estate is worth. And you knew that before you walked down the aisle with my son. Caleb sat down heavily, his face pale. Sarah, is this true? Caleb, your father is trying to manipulate you. Did you know about the money before we got married? It's complicated. It's not complicated. It's a yes or no question. Sarah's careful composure finally cracked completely. Fine, yes, I knew about the inheritance, but that's not why I married you. When did you know? I found out about Frederick's condition a few months ago. But Caleb, I loved you before I knew about any money. A few months ago, right around the time you started pushing for a quick engagement. That's coincidence. Is it? Sarah, did you also know that my father was planning to contest my uncle's will? Sarah's eyes widened. What? I pulled out another document, this one completely fabricated by Tom, but official-looking enough to be convincing. My father had concerns about Uncle Frederick's mental state in his final months. He was planning to challenge the will on grounds of diminished capacity. If he succeeded, the inheritance would be void. That's impossible. Why is it impossible, Sarah? Unless you knew more about Uncle Frederick's condition than you should have. She stared at the document, and I could see her mind racing, trying to process this new information that threatened her carefully laid plans. This is all lies, she whispered. Which part? The part where you researched my uncle's estate, or the part where you married my son to get access to money that might not even exist? Caleb stood up slowly, his face a mixture of hurt and anger. Sarah, tell me the truth. Did you marry me for money? Caleb, I love you. That's not what I asked. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Sarah's shoulders sagged in defeat. The money was part of it, she admitted, but not the only part. I do care about you, Caleb. Part of it? How much of a part? I thought we could have a good life together. The money would make things easier. You researched my family's finances before you agreed to marry me. I wanted to make sure you had potential, that we could build something together. Potential? You mean you wanted to make sure I came from money? Caleb, everyone considers finances when they're choosing a life partner. Do they investigate their boyfriend's family inheritance records? Do they marry people for money they haven't even inherited yet? Sarah had no answer for that. I watched my son process the truth about his marriage, and despite everything, I felt sorry for him. Learning that someone you love has deceived you is devastating, even when you're getting the truth secondhand. Dad, Caleb said quietly, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about the wedding. I'm sorry about believing her lies about you. I'm sorry about all of it. Son, you don't need to apologize. You were manipulated by someone who saw an opportunity and took it. Sarah made one final attempt to salvage the situation. The marriage can still work. We can build something real together. Built on lies? Caleb shook his head. Sarah, you made me cut my father out of my life for money that might not even exist. The money exists, but my father's love for me exists too, and you made me choose money over love. Sarah looked at both of us, finally understanding that her carefully constructed plan had collapsed completely. This isn't over, she said, as she headed for the door. Yes, it is, I replied. And Sarah, if you try to cause any more problems for my family, I have documentation of everything you've done. Fraud, manipulation, possibly even identity theft for those phone calls to my uncle's attorney. She left without another word, taking her portfolio and her dreams of Thompson family money with her. Caleb and I sat in silence for several minutes after she left. Dad, how do I fix this? We'll figure it out, son. We'll figure it out together. For the first time in months, that felt like a real possibility. 3 days later, I was sitting in Tom Mitchell's office, reviewing the final details of my estate plan, when his secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Mitchell, there's a Sarah Thompson here to see Mr. Mark Thompson. She says it's urgent and involves legal documents. Tom and I exchanged glances. We'd expected some kind of follow-up from Sarah, but not this quickly. Send her in, I said. Sarah entered the office looking nothing like the composed woman who'd sat in my living room 3 days earlier. Her hair was pulled back severely, she wore no makeup, and she carried a large manila envelope that she clutched like a lifeline. Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you. You can say whatever you need to say in front of my attorney. She glanced at Tom nervously, then back at me. It's about the inheritance. There are things you don't know. What things? Things about why I really researched your uncle's estate. Things about your son that you need to understand. Tom leaned forward. Ms. Thompson, are you here in any legal capacity, or are you here as a private citizen? I'm here because I made a mistake, and now people are going to get hurt if I don't fix it. She sat down across from us and opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents, computer printouts, and what looked like medical records. Mr. Thompson, I did research your uncle's estate, but not for the reasons you think. Then explain it to me. 6 months ago, Caleb asked me to help him understand his family's financial situation. He was worried about you. Worried about me, how? He said you'd been acting strangely since the divorce, forgetting things, repeating stories, sometimes not recognizing people you'd known for years. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's not true, isn't it? Caleb told me about the time you showed up at his old apartment, the one he'd moved out of a year earlier. You seemed confused about where he lived. I remembered that day. I'd been tired after a long day of work, and I'd driven to the wrong apartment complex out of habit. It wasn't confusion, it was simple mistake. Or the time you called him on his birthday, except his birthday had been the week before and you'd already called him then. That had been a calendar mix-up. I'd been thinking it was the 15th when it was actually the 22nd. Mr. Thompson, Caleb was concerned that you might be developing early-stage dementia. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's ridiculous. Is it? When was the last time you had a complete physical exam? When was the last time you had cognitive testing done? Tom intervened. Ms. Thompson, what does this have to do with your research into his uncle's estate? Caleb asked me to look into the family's financial situation because he was worried about what would happen if his father needed care. Long-term care facilities, memory care units, medical expenses. That stuff is expensive. She pulled out more documents. This is what I found when I researched Frederick Thompson's estate. Not just the inheritance amount, but the conditions. What conditions? Your uncle's will has a clause that voids the inheritance if the beneficiary is declared mentally incompetent within 2 years of receiving it. The money would go to charity instead. I stared at the document she handed me. It was a copy of Uncle Frederick's actual will, and there, in legal language I could barely understand, was exactly what she'd described. Frederick Thompson was concerned about elder fraud, Sarah continued. He'd seen too many cases of elderly people being manipulated out of their money by caregivers or family members, so he built in protections. Protections against what? Against someone inheriting millions of dollars and then immediately being declared incompetent so that their guardian could control the money. Tom took the document and read through it carefully. This is a competency clause. If Mark is declared mentally incompetent within 24 months of Frederick's death, the entire inheritance goes to the Seattle Children's Hospital. $7.6 million, Sarah said quietly. Gone if someone successfully argues that Mr. Thompson can't manage his own affairs. The room spun slightly. Why are you telling me this? Because Caleb doesn't know about the competency clause, and there are people who do know about it. What people? Linda, your ex-wife. Sarah pulled out more documents, phone records, email printouts, legal consultation notes. After you told Linda about the inheritance, she started making calls, first to her attorney, then to a specialist in elder law, then to a psychiatrist who does competency evaluations. Linda's trying to have me declared incompetent? She's building a case. The strange behavior Caleb told me about, the social isolation since your divorce, the fact that you're suddenly inheriting millions of dollars, she's going to argue that you're either not mentally capable of managing that money or that you're being influenced by someone who wants to control it. Tom was taking notes furiously. Who else knows about this? Linda's attorney, Dr. Patricia Henshaw, that's the psychiatrist, and Linda's new boyfriend, Richard Moss. Richard Moss. He works for a financial planning company that specializes in managing assets for elderly clients with diminished capacity. If Linda gets guardianship over you, Richard's company would manage the $7 million. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Linda wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to steal my inheritance by having me declared incompetent. Sarah, why are you telling me this? I thought you wanted access to this money yourself. She was quiet for a long moment. Because I realized something over the last 3 days. I married your son because I thought he came from a wealthy family, but the family I thought was wealthy, Linda's side, doesn't have any money. All the money is coming from your side. And if Linda succeeds in getting you declared incompetent, Caleb won't inherit anything anyway. So you're protecting your investment. No, Mr. Thompson. I'm protecting my husband. Because I realized that if Linda destroys you, she destroys Caleb too. And whatever my original motivations were, I don't want to see that happen. Tom looked up from his notes. Mark, this is serious. If Linda files a competency petition, you'll have to defend yourself in court. And given the amount of money involved, it'll be a public proceeding. What do I need to do? First, we need to get you a complete medical evaluation. Cognitive testing, psychological assessment, the works. We need to establish that you're mentally competent before Linda can build a case that you're not. Second, Sarah added, we need to document Linda's real motivations. I have recordings of some of her phone calls. Recordings? Caleb was suspicious about why his mother was suddenly so interested in your health. He asked me to monitor her communications. That's how I found out about her plan. She pulled out a small digital recorder. This is Linda talking to Dr. Henshaw about your case. Tom and I listened as Linda's voice filled the office. He's been showing clear signs of cognitive decline for months. Memory problems, confusion about dates and places, social withdrawal. My son has been concerned but didn't want to interfere. But with this inheritance, we can't let him make decisions that could affect his future care needs. And this is Linda talking to Richard Moss about the financial management aspect. Linda's voice again. $7.6 million is too much money for someone in Mark's condition to handle alone. He needs professional management, someone who understands the complexities of estate planning and long-term care financing. She never mentions that she would benefit financially from this arrangement, I noted. Because she's smart, Tom said. She's building a case based on concern for your welfare, not financial gain. It's a common strategy in elder fraud cases. Sarah handed me another document. This is Linda's timeline. She plans to file the competency petition next week, right after she gets a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Henshaw. An evaluation I haven't agreed to participate in. She doesn't need your agreement. Family members can petition for competency hearings based on observed behavior and professional opinions. I felt trapped, cornered by people who were supposed to care about me, but instead saw me as either an obstacle or an opportunity. Sarah, I have to ask you something directly. Are you helping me because you genuinely want to protect Caleb, or because you're hoping to get back in my good graces so you can access the inheritance yourself? She looked me directly in the eyes. Mr. Thompson, I'm helping you because 3 days ago, I watched your son realize that someone he trusted had manipulated him. I watched him understand that he'd hurt his father based on lies I'd helped create. And I realized that if I let Linda destroy you the way I almost destroyed your relationship with Caleb, I'd be responsible for ruining his life completely. That doesn't answer my question about the money. You're right, it doesn't. The honest answer is that I don't know anymore. When I started dating Caleb, it was partly about financial security. When I married him, it was partly about the inheritance. But watching him these last 3 days, seeing how much losing you has hurt him, I think I might actually love him for real now. And if that means giving up any claim to the Thompson family money, then that's what it means. Because the most valuable thing your family has isn't money, Mr. Thompson. It's the relationship between you and your son. And I almost destroyed that for $7 million. Tom cleared his throat. This is all very touching, but we have a practical problem to solve. Linda's petition is going to be filed soon, and we need to be ready for it. What's our strategy? We prove that you're competent, that Linda has financial motives for this petition, and that her boyfriend's company would benefit from managing your assets. We turn this from a story about protecting an elderly man into a story about family members trying to steal an inheritance. And Sarah's recordings? They'll help establish Linda's real motivations. But Mark, you need to understand something. This is going to be ugly. Linda's going to air every mistake you've made since the divorce, every moment of confusion or forgetfulness, every sign that you might not be handling your life perfectly. I can handle ugly, Tom. What I can't handle is losing my son again because his mother wants to steal my money. Sarah stood up. Mr. Thompson, there's one more thing you should know. Linda doesn't plan to stop with the competency petition. What do you mean? If that doesn't work, she's prepared to argue that your inheritance itself is fraudulent, that Uncle Frederick was manipulated into changing his will, or that he wasn't competent when he made you his beneficiary. On what basis? On the basis that you hadn't spoken to Frederick in years, that you had no relationship with him, and that it's suspicious for someone to leave that much money to a relative they barely knew. The scope of Linda's plan was breathtaking. She wasn't just trying to control my inheritance, she was trying to make it disappear entirely. Tom, how long do we have? Based on what Sarah's telling us, maybe a week before Linda files her petition. Then we'd better get started. As we prepared to leave Tom's office, Sarah stopped at the door. Mr. Thompson, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but when this is over, do you think you could forgive me? Not for the money, but for Caleb's sake. I looked at this young woman who'd almost destroyed my family for money, but who was now risking everything to help save it. Sarah, forgiveness isn't something you earn by doing the right thing once, but it's a start. She nodded and left, leaving Tom and me to plan our defense against a woman who'd once promised to love, honor, and cherish me, but who was now trying to steal everything I had. The wedding was supposed to be at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, St. Michael's Church, the same place where Caleb had been baptized, where Linda and I had been married, and where Caleb had married Sarah just 3 weeks earlier. But this wasn't Caleb's second wedding. This was mine. I stood at the altar in my best suit, watching Margaret Chen walk down the aisle in a simple cream-colored dress. She was the attorney who'd helped me navigate Uncle Frederick's estate, and over the past 2 weeks of legal battles with Linda, she'd become something more. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind. Linda's competency petition had been filed exactly when Sarah predicted, but Tom and I had been ready. My medical evaluations showed perfect cognitive function. The recordings Sarah provided proved Linda's financial motivations, and when Richard Moss's company was investigated, they found evidence of previous elder fraud cases. Linda's petition was dismissed with prejudice. Her attorney withdrew from the case, and Richard Moss was facing criminal charges for conspiracy to commit elder fraud. But the real victory had come 3 days ago, when Caleb knocked on my apartment door. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something." He'd looked nervous, fidgeting with that wedding ring again, But this time the ring was in his hand, not on his finger. "I filed for divorce yesterday," he'd said simply. "Caleb, you don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." Sarah was right about one thing. She did help save you from Linda's scheme, but she was wrong about everything else. I can't stay married to someone who researched my family's finances before she agreed to love me. We talked for hours that night, about the wedding, about the lies, about the years of manipulation that had driven us apart, and slowly we'd started to rebuild what Linda and Sarah had tried to destroy. Now, standing at the altar waiting for Margaret, I thought about how much had changed in just a month. Uncle Frederick's inheritance had been finalized. Linda was facing financial ruin from legal fees and the collapse of her scheme. Sarah had moved back to Seattle, where she was rebuilding her career and, according to Caleb, learning to live with the consequences of her choices. And I was getting married to a woman who'd loved me for who I was, not what I might inherit. The priest, Father Martinez, who'd known our family for 30 years, cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Mark Thompson and Margaret Chen in holy matrimony." I looked out at the congregation. Caleb sat in the front row, smiling genuinely for the first time in months. My brother Mike was there with his family, Margaret's children from her first marriage, neighbors, friends, people who'd supported me through the worst period of my life. And in the back corner, looking uncomfortable but present, sat Linda. She'd asked to come through Caleb, said she wanted to apologize publicly for what she'd tried to do. Tom had advised against it, but I'd agreed. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't just about moving forward. It was about refusing to let other people's actions poison your own heart. "Do you, Mark Thompson, take Margaret Chen to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Margaret Chen, take Mark Thompson to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." As we exchanged rings, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the pain of discovering Caleb's wedding through Facebook, the shock of learning about Uncle Frederick's inheritance, the betrayal of Sarah's manipulation and Linda's scheme, but also the unexpected gift of Margaret's love, the reconciliation with my son, the understanding that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who stand by you when everything falls apart. By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mark, you may kiss your bride. As I kissed Margaret, I heard Caleb cheering from the front row. The sound made my heart full in a way that all of Uncle Frederick's money never could. At the reception, held in the church fellowship hall, Linda approached me during a quiet moment. "Mark, I need to say something to you." "Linda, you don't need to apologize again. We've moved past this." "No, I do need to say it. Not because you need to hear it, but because I need to say it." She took a deep breath. "I tried to steal from you. I tried to have you declared mentally incompetent so I could control your inheritance, and I justified it by telling myself I was protecting Caleb's interests. But you weren't protecting Caleb. No, I was protecting my own financial future. Richard had convinced me that we could manage your money better than you could, and that everyone would benefit. But really, I was just angry that you'd gotten something I thought you didn't deserve. Linda, the money doesn't define me. It never did. I know that now. But for a while I let it define how I saw you, and I'm sorry." She paused, looking across the room at Caleb, who was talking animatedly with Margaret's daughter. "He's happy," she said. "Happier than I've seen him since before the divorce. You did that, Mark. You gave him his father back. We did that together. All of us, even you in the end. How do you figure? Because your scheme forced everyone to choose between truth and money. And in the end, the people who mattered chose truth." Linda nodded slowly. "I hope someday I can choose truth too." Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Margaret and I had returned to our new house, a modest place we'd bought together, with my inheritance safely protected in trusts for our children and grandchildren, Caleb called. "Dad, I wanted to thank you for something." "What's that, son?" "For showing me what real love looks like. Margaret didn't research your finances before she married you. She didn't calculate the value of your inheritance or plan how to access your money. She just loved you. That's what love is supposed to be, Caleb. I know that now. And I know something else too." "What?" "I know why Uncle Frederick left you that money. It wasn't because you were the only Thompson left or because you needed it most. It was because you were the only one who would use it the right way. How do you figure?" Because in the month since you inherited $7 million, you've spent more time worrying about our family relationships than thinking about the money. You used it to protect people, not to control them. That's what Uncle Frederick saw in you. After hanging up, I sat on my back porch with Margaret, watching the sunset over Portland's West Hills. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About what?" "About the money, the drama, Sarah's manipulation, Linda's scheme. Any part of this you wish had happened differently?" I thought about it for a moment. I wish Caleb hadn't been hurt. I wish Sarah had been honest from the beginning. I wish Linda had been able to let go of her anger. "But you don't regret the inheritance?" "No, because the inheritance didn't change who I am. It revealed who everyone else really was. Sarah showed her willingness to manipulate for money. Linda showed her willingness to steal for it. But Caleb showed his willingness to give it up for truth. And you showed that some people can love without calculating the financial benefits. And what did you show? I showed that money can't buy the things that matter most, but it can sure as hell reveal who's worth caring about." Margaret laughed. "That's very philosophical for a contractor. That's very practical for a millionaire." We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. Tomorrow I would go back to work, not because I needed the money anymore, but because I liked building things with my hands. Margaret would go back to her law practice, helping families navigate the same kinds of legal challenges we'd just survived. Caleb would continue rebuilding his life as a single man, with the wisdom that comes from learning to distinguish between love and manipulation. And Sarah would face the consequences of her choices, hopefully learning that the shortcuts to financial security often lead to longer journeys toward genuine happiness. The inheritance was secure, protected by legal structures that would benefit our family for generations, but more importantly, our family itself was secure, strengthened by having survived attempts to destroy it. Uncle Frederick had given me more than money. He'd given me the opportunity to discover what I was really made of, and what the people in my life were really made of. In the end, that knowledge was worth more than $7 million. Though having $7 million didn't hurt either. Margaret squeezed my hand as we watched the last light fade from the western sky. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now we live happily ever after," I said, just like Uncle Frederick would have wanted. And for the first time in my adult life, I actually believed that was possible,